Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and before we get started on tonight's story, I want to let you know about Makeship. MrCreepyPasta, as a cyborg, is currently available on Makeship. You can be able to order him now, and only for the next couple of days. You can find more at the link in the description down below. Or you can head over to Makeship.com, and if you order him now before Monday, you can get 10% off your order. And now, on to tonight's story. My roommate Paulette had become my best friend over the few months that we shared our college dorm. She'd helped me to come out of my shell a bit, inviting me to any get-togethers that she went to, and even forcing me to some if I was hard-headed about getting out for some fresh air. She had made me feel welcomed and wanted, honestly, which is something I didn't experience growing up as an orphan who hopped from foster home to foster home. I'd never had any biological family reach out to me or made any connections with the families I briefly lived with. So, feeling welcome was something that I had always craved. I wasn't shocked whenever she invited me to her family's Thanksgiving dinner. She'd been telling her family about me for a while, even having phone calls where she would put it on speaker and have them talk to me, something I was pretty awkward with. They did really sound like nice people, and I knew if I stayed at the dorm, I'd just be sad thinking about everyone else getting to spend time with their families. I thought it would be a nice distraction, even though I knew I'd probably spend the whole time making awkward small talk. So Paulette and I piled up into her Toyota Camry and headed out towards her house. They lived about an hour away in a tiny little town that had barely anything, most of it adorned with back roads full of pine trees. It was on one of these back roads where Paulette's family had their 2-story farmhouse, which had a very cozy and homey feel to it. Although it was 2 stories, it felt cozy instead of roomy due to how much stuff was piled into it. Kinda reminded me of the Weasley house from Harry Potter, except appearing more stable and less likely to topple over. Vintage furniture mostly filled the house, but it also had a healthy mixture of newer items. The newer items mostly electronics. My favorite part of it was the huge flat-screen TV that sat above the beautiful ornate fireplace, seeming so out of place. Little swirls stood out on the fireplace, resembled little puffs of smoke standing out on the brick and somehow looking delicate, even though they were made of stone. A bookshelf with books stuffed into every inch sat beside the fireplace, looking like it was a couple of books away from toppling over. A very comfy and worn-down looking couch, paired with 2 matching chairs, sat in front of the fireplace, waiting for the visitors. We were the first 2 to sit down. We were quickly surrounded by Paulette's other family members that gradually showed up to the occasion. Soon the sitting area felt just as packed as the bookshelf. I felt very awkward and claustrophobic. "What's your name, sweetie?" an older woman asked me. I looked over in the direction of her voice and almost jumped a foot in my chair due to the strange appearance that she had. Her wildly curly hair fought against the bobby pins that she had holding it in, a strong smell of hairspray coming from it. Her pointy glasses reminded me of Roz from Monsters, Inc., although she had a rather sweet-sounding voice compared to that character. Her lipstick was the brightest shade of red I had ever seen, and it stained the filter of the cigarette that she had in her hand. Seeing how uncomfortable I was, Paulette reached over from her perch next to me and patted the woman's upper arm. "Auntie Jolene, this is my roommate Piper," she introduced. The woman nodded as she took a drag from her cigarette, making that weird scrunch-up expression with her face that all smokers do to not release smoke into someone else's face. "Honey, you're so tiny," she said. "You need to put some meat on your bones." "Don't worry," said Paulette. "I'm going to be making her plate for her." They both chuckled at this comment before switching to discussing some distant relative that they hadn't seen in forever. I kind of zoned out as they talked, trying to cover my nose from the smoke without being obvious and seeming rude. Thankfully, it wasn't long before Paulette's mom called us all into the dining room. I'd never been happier to get off of a couch. I thought the living room was adorable, but it was nothing compared to how phenomenal the dining room looked. The furniture in here was strictly vintage, mostly looking Victorian and intricate in its design. The table itself took up the entirety of the room, spanning from one end to the other. Its legs and edges looked hand-carved, with the legs specifically being made to look like a waterfall of roses was drizzling from them. The chairs matched that design, along with a fireplace at the opposite end of the room, A beautiful crystal chandelier sat above the table, with crystals hanging down and twinkling as sunlight beams bounced off of them to the windows. Not only was the room beautiful, but the spread of food was just as amazing and smelled absolutely delicious. Dressing, chicken, dumplings, a huge ham, and a huge turkey were some of the dishes on the table, but they were far from it. The small table beside the fireplace overflowed with the desserts as well. Plates, cups, and silverware waited before each chair. A huge glass of lemonade waited to fill those cups. This room was truly something I had never seen besides similar ones that I had seen in movies. "Well, dig in, guys," announced Paulette's mom, and everyone quickly picked a chair. My mouth was already watering, and by the time Paulette's dad began cutting into the turkey, I felt like I was practically drooling. Excited chatter surrounded the table as everyone began filling their plates, and Paulette grabbed mine to begin filling it just as she said she would. One of Paulette's brothers, Jared, got up from the table and placed a record on a record player I hadn't noticed besides the dessert table. It crackled a bit as it spun around, but soon a mixture of instruments began to play, like a piano, clarinet, and violin. Soon a voice began to sound from the speakers as well. "Oh, you're my honey. Oh, you're my baby. Oh, you're my sweetie pie. My, don't you see, my sweet little treat, what you're doing to me." The lyrics were quite strange. I found myself distracted from my food as I continued to listen to the lyrics, staring at the record as it spun round and round. "Uncle Edgar used to think he could make it as a singer," said Paulette's dad as he noticed me staring, "but I think his sense of humor is just too strange." I didn't really know what he meant by that. No one decided to explain. So I left the conversation at that and turned back to my plate. "Wait, where's the special dish?" asked a young boy who I recognized from Paulette's family picture as her little cousin Richard. I glanced around the table, finally taking the time to get a good look at everyone that hadn't talked yet. There's only a few people from the picture book that I didn't see. The missing family members were quickly wiped from my mind as Paulette's mom appeared from the kitchen holding another huge dish, this one containing a plate of meat that I didn't really recognize. It took up the entire pan and seemed hard for her to carry. Everyone quickly scrambled to move the dishes that already were taking up the table so that she could set the heavy load down. "What's that?" I whispered to Paulette. "Oh, she stared. "Pig, I think," she shrugged, turning back over to the conversation that I had taken her from. Her response was weird to me, but I thought that it was probably just my nerves about the whole day that were getting to me. I looked back at the dish as her mom sliced into the meat, cutting thin strips off. Blood and other juices flowed from the cuts, filling up the bottom of the pan. I had never really been squeamish of blood. In fact, I've always loved my steaks a bit bloody, but my nerves were still making me feel weird. Is that how pig was supposed to be prepared? I began to feel bile come up my throat as the blood continued to pour. I tried to distract myself by eating again, but I couldn't ignore the feeling of goosebumps on my arm. I glanced around the table. I saw everyone else was perfectly fine, eating away or conversing with each other. Why was I the only one freaking out over a pig? You know the feeling like an answer to something is on the tip of your tongue, but you can't figure out what it is that your brain wants you to say. It's like the memory is scratching at your brain, trying to break free, but you don't know why you can't think of it. And that's how I was feeling right now. And it made a mixture with the feelings of anxiety. The mixture overwhelmed me. I closed my eyes, taking deep breaths to try and calm myself. It's okay, I thought to myself. There's nothing wrong here. You're surrounded by nice people, and you have a delicious meal to finish off in front of you. I slowly opened my eyes, thinking that I had things under control now, until I realized my plate seemed a lot farther away than it should be. And then I remembered what my brain wanted to. The word on the tip of my tongue. "Oh no," I said out loud without meaning to. "Long pig." I heard Paulette ask what was wrong, but I was unable to respond. Everything seemed to fade out of existence besides me and the strange meat. I heard voices asking me if I was okay over and over, but I couldn't focus on them. The only sounds that were able to break free of the walls I suddenly had around me were the lyrics still playing from the record player. You look so scrumptious, oh, so delicious, my sweetie sweet pea. Come on over here, my sweet precious dear, and give me a little bite. I heard a muffled, do you want to go to the bathroom? Come from beside me. I was unable to respond, though, and a moment later I felt arms wrap around me and gently lift me, and I was practically carried out of the room, my feet somehow still able to operate. I felt like I was floating. Everything seemed dim. The sunlight there were moments before now sucked out. It felt like a blur, but I was brought into a tiny bathroom and sat on the closest toilet. We sat there for a few minutes. Me on the toilet and the person on the floor, until I finally calmed down enough for the world to come back into focus. I realized it was Paulette sitting on the floor in front of me, with her legs crossed, patiently waiting for me to be able to communicate again. Hey, you okay? She asked in a soft voice. I nodded. Thank you. It's no biggie, she reassured. What made it happen anyway? I thought about my response for a while, debating if I should make something up or not, because strange meat sounded like a silly reason to have a panic attack. Why would they be eating long pig? Would she even know what that was if I told her? It took a while before I decided to tell her the truth. Not the long pig part, but the rest of it. The meat gave me a weird vibe, I responded. The pig? She asked. I nodded, and she giggled. Oh, that's okay. I promise it was just pig. Why did it freak you out? I shrugged. I don't know. Just a weird vibe. She nodded as well, and stood up from her position on the floor. Are you okay enough to go back out there now? I think I'm gonna sit here for a bit. She nodded once more before exiting, slowly closing the door behind her. It was a few minutes before I got up from the toilet. I figured I'd been in there long enough, so I splashed some water on my face before taking a few deep breaths and exiting the bathroom as well. Walking down the tiny hallway and out of the living room, I was able to notice even more details I loved about the house. The mishmash of recent and vintage framed photos on the walls, the crazy pattern wallpaper, a random pile of shoes stashed around the front door. It all seemed so homey, something that I had never had the privilege to fully experience firsthand. It made me feel safe. Even though I felt safe, old habits die hard, so when I rounded the corner to the other hall, I paused in my tracks, deciding to eavesdrop for a bit on the conversation to see how much I had embarrassed myself. You didn't tell us the one you were bringing was loony, I heard Aunt Jolene say. That made me frown, shocked that my suspicions had been true. They all seemed so friendly and inviting. And she's skinny as all get out, I heard Jared say. Shh, Paulette hushed them. You guys are just being way too loud. She was the best thing I could get. That comment confused me. What did she mean by that? Did she not actually like me? Did she view me as a bad friend? Last year you got a chubby one, though, whined Richard. Shut up, Richard, shouted Paulette. She'll taste just fine. I don't know about that, Polly, said Paulette's dad. The fatty ones always have more flavor. My eyes grew wide as I realized exactly what they were talking about. Uncle Edgar's weird song started playing in my head like a cruel serenade, mixing with the memory I had over and over. And why did she say long pig? Asked Paulette's mom, reading my mind. Did she know what the meat was? No, Paulette said. She said the meat gave her a weird feeling, but I don't think she knew what it was. Well, we better get started before she does find out. I don't even know who said that comment. All I know is I sprinted full force to the front door. I didn't bother pulling my shoes on because I could already hear them discussing what that sound was from the dining room. I jerked on the door handle to no avail. I did the next best thing, which was to wrap my hand up in the white curtain decorating the window beside the door and smash my fist through the glass until it broke. I got rid of the glass shards the best I could before hopping through. But even if I was cut, there was too much adrenaline pumping through my body to feel any pain. I didn't feel the pain in my lungs as I sprinted in the cold air, or the pokey branches on the ground either. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew it had to be somewhere far from them. It was that moment that a ray of sunshine seemed to glide through the trees surrounding their front yard, seemingly lighting up an escape route for me. A car was at the end of the route, one of the many parked ones owned by the family members on the edge of the yard. I ran to it, hoping against all hope that one of them had been stupid enough to leave their car unlocked. I tried out 3 doors with no luck. I began panicking as I heard footsteps approaching, but I kept trying cars. I approached Paulette's car and looked into the interior, rushing as I could hear the person getting closer. The moment I heard Paulette scream my name as she approached, it dawned on me. She had a push-to-start car, and I hadn't seen her take her keys out of her sweater pocket since we got here. I unlocked the car and hopped into the driver's seat. In seconds, having the car started and already backing up to only a few more. Paulette chased after me as the car moved, shouting something I couldn't hear. I didn't let it faze me, though. Placing all of my focus on getting the hell out of there, I quickly whipped the car around and then zoomed down the long driveway, trying to get the hell out of there as fast as possible. I didn't have enough service to GPS my way out, so I had to go off memory. Paulette's family tried to follow me, but with the number of twists and turns I was making out of confusion, they had trouble staying on my trail. Seeing their cars pop up randomly again and again still frightened me, and one time they even tried to ram Paulette's car, but by luck, I made it to safety back to the town. Their cars quickly disappeared, but I had no idea where. I didn't really care at that point. As long as they weren't still chasing me, I was fine. I quickly found the police station. I tried to file a report. I say tried because I noticed the police officers were acting very strange when I explained where the house was. I finally asked what the problem was after they kept whispering and giving each other confused looks. "No one's lived in that house for 4 years," said one of the officers. "That's not true. Her whole family does. I saw them." But it was true. When we went back to the house, they were gone. Along with a few of the newer items, the house was never theirs. It was just one that they had been lucky enough to find to set up shop in. It was owned by a wealthy family, one they had bought to restore as a possible vacation home, but they never really checked on it because it was so far out of the country, and they figured no one could find it. Boy, were they wrong. And I later found out that Paulette wasn't her real name. I assume the same for all the rest of them. The FBI told me they had actually been on the hunt for them for a while. But with the constant name changes and them moving around so frequently, they could never stay on top of it. Paulette and her brother were the bait. They got to know people that became close with them so they could bring them back home, particularly targeting people like me who had no one else. I guess we'd be more likely to be forgotten about. Missing persons swept under the rug. The FBI didn't have a definite number on how many missing persons cases were their victims, but with the way they acted when they discussed it, it seemed to be a very high number. I was lucky to not be added to that list. When I managed to get back to the dorm, Paulette's room had been cleaned out. The only thing she had left was Uncle Edgar's record and a picture of us together that we had taken when we first met. Both of which she had placed on my desk. When I flipped the picture over, I saw 2 sentences scribbled on it in Paulette's handwriting. "You were right. The meat was human." I'd do anything for a hit. It's a shameful fact that not many people would admit about themselves, but not me. I'm nothing if not honest. That's why they call me Frank. I cut off an arm and sliced my tongue in 2 for a little baggie of the good stuff. So many track marks up my arm that my poor little nephew once tried to use me as a dot to dot. Yeah. I wasn't always like this. I feel that's important to mention. I was a smart kid, a little morose and prone to melancholy, but smart. It only takes a little mistake. A friend you shouldn't have made, a trauma you ought to have faced up to. I could be you. When I was younger, I was good at writing, and after school, I managed to get a place at university to study English. I shouldn't have gone. It was at university that it all started going downhill. One fateful evening at some shitty little freshers party above the student union, I had my first experience with weed, which led to a loving dalliance with coke, or Charlie, as me and my friends would call it. We'd party all weekend, high off our tits, snorting powdered lines in our bedrooms and inhaling hippie crack out of latex balloons. It was fun. I wanted it to last forever. My friends didn't. They all got jobs and families. How boring. I stopped being able to afford Charlie a few weeks ago, opted for cheaper bedtime heroin. I took her as my wife during a sad little Christmas alone. She ain't as pretty, but she gets me there all the time. Though cheaper heroin is still expensive, and well, employment's been a challenge for me. Try sticking to a job when you look like me, when you smell like me. Poor mother cried last time I saw her. My arms full with her jewelry. My brother, who gave me a black eye as I tried to slip out the back door, had to cover his mouth and nose with a rag to avoid the stench. Even my family can't stand the sight of me. An employer wouldn't look twice at me, and if he did, it would be to judge me or to make sure I didn't take the bonnet mascot off his Jaguar after the interview. So I did little jobs here and there, and some shoplifting to fill in the gaps. My favorite thing to pinch is infant formula. There's always a demand for it. It goes for a pretty penny. 10 quid a tub in the shops. You could sell to penny-stripped parents at half price. They'd grab it out of your hands, even if you smelt like Danny DeVito's armpit after a workout. I sell it in a Facebook group. You know the ones. Free and for sale in whatever dump you live in. It was there that I saw the job ad. A post about a woman named Beatrice. Profile picture was a photo of a tulip. People don't often post job adverts there. It's a separate group for that, but sometimes they get confused. Old people on the internet, and they mix like oil and water. It seemed benign enough. Hi there, lovelies. Hope I'm posting this properly. This new technology, eh? I got a little job that needs doing. My house has gotten a little bit of a mess lately. I'm a single mother. It's hard to keep everything tidy and clean. I'm sure all you ladies will understand. We have a bit of a rat problem. Needs doing today. No time wasters, please. Cash in hand. Cleaning supplies provided. £200. Edit. No negotiations, my lovelies. The number is final. Also, how do I report users? A mean man called Robert offered his pleasure sausage as payment. These youths. I chuckled myself a little and stared at my empty wallet. Cleaning through a little rat droppings for 200 smackers. Native technophobe lady, too. It was like Christmas. I bet I could pinch a family heirloom while I was there, too. So I sent her a message. Hey there, I'd be happy to do this for you. Just let me know your address. I'll be over as soon as possible. Beatrice said, Hi, my lovely. A young gentleman who can clean. What a dream. I'll pop you over my address just shortly. It's just me and my little darling who live here. My son will be in the living room. You don't have to clean in there. But you mustn't bother him. He loves his video games and hates to be distracted, thank you. And I said, sure, fine. Be there sharpish. The address wasn't very far, thankfully. My jaw was still trembling from a little bit of coke I'd managed to score last night off this deadbeat passed out in a nightclub. Still felt very fragile. The house was nice from the outside. It's an ex-council house. I could tell by the fresh paint job. It was at the end of a block, and there was a mobility scooter parked by the front door. Thought she was a single mother, not a single grandmother. I rubbed my hands together, clambered through the gate, clapped on the door. The door opened almost immediately. It was as if she had been there already waiting to open it. Had she? Oh, hi there, my lovely, a shrill voice startled me. I was too rough to deal with this chipmunk-ass bitch. It's so good you came. She was a portly little thing who walked with a pronounced limp. Her fingers were like Richmond sausages, and her wrinkled face had been emulsioned in a thick layer of orange foundation. She had an apron on, one of those gag ones that looked like a sexy woman in lingerie, and her lips were crusted over with cheap matte lipstick. Her efforts to disguise her age seemed to me done precisely the opposite, but who am I to judge? I'm just a neighborhood junkie, a dopehead, meth head, druggie, whatever you call us. Whoever the fuck you are. Just inside here, forgive the smell, it's the rats. The exterminator said there's probably a dead one somewhere, she chirped. I crossed the threshold into the house and immediately regretted every decision I had made that led me to this point. Anyone else would have turned around and left. Not me. I had my wife Helen to think about, and my mistress, Charlie, to save up for. It's bad. Jesus fuck, woman, this ain't a dead rat. This fucking family of dead rats. I covered my nose with the sleeve of my jacket. Beatrice looked offended. Ammonia hung in the air as an invisible haze, turning tears into acid and breath into hot fire. I'd smelt death only once before. It'd been my neighbor and fellow druggie, Big Bobby. His so-called mates had been too busy getting high to call anyone. He was bloated and blue and dripping with maggots when the body collectors came to drag his sorry ass out of the door. They had all gotten nose blind to him over the week and a half that they lived with his corpse. Easy to do when you're higher than the Burj Khalifa on stilts. Beatrice must have been nose blind too. Only way you could live here. Mind your tongue, my lovely, just like my son. I know it's bad. It's just so hard being a single mother these days. She shook her head dismissively. How old's your kid? I asked, curiously, wiping my wet eyes. I was expecting the house to be disgusting to match the stench, but the hallway was perfect. I'd seen messier show houses. 34 next week, she squealed. Uh-huh. Jesus, fuck me in the ass with a bottle of white lightning. Crazy-ass bitch. Now, if you would start in the bathroom and move to the kitchen, please leave the living room to me. My son's in there. He hates to be bothered, Beatrice said. I've left all the cleaning supplies in the cupboard by the stairs. Anything you need, I shall be out in the garden. My petunias aren't looking too well, and I must tend to them, my lovely. I was expecting an absolute crap hole. The bathroom was spotless like the hallway. There were some foundation smears into the walls, but that was nothing a little degreaser couldn't handle. The kitchen was fine, too. I couldn't work out where the smell was coming from and where the rats were. Usually rats congregated in the kitchen. At least that was my experience, having had a good few infestations myself. The smell, however, lingered. No matter how much Dettol I sprayed or Zoflora I wiped under my nose, there was death in the air, but where the frick was it? I finished up the bathroom and the kitchen and spared a thought for the living room. She hadn't wanted me to go in there. Maybe that's where she was hiding the good stuff. These old codgers always had some money slipped away somewhere. Her son was in there, a little risky, but I could be subtle. The layout of these council houses were strange. The living room was to the back of the property, not connected to the kitchen or even the bathroom. The door to it was shut, and I could hear a very quiet buzz whirring around the threshold. Was this it? The smell was stronger here, but why wouldn't she want me to clean the source of the stench? Wasn't that the whole point of my employment? When I opened the door, my eyes burned as if they had been met by hot smoke from an oven. I coughed and felt a sickly sweetness cling to the back of my throat. This was it. This is where death lived. The TV was on. Call of Duty looked like it. I could hear the push of fingers on buttons. Her son was there. I could see a rush of greasy brown hair sticking up from the back of the fabric-patterned sofa. That looked like something from the 90s. All right, dude. Just cleaning up for your mom, I said cautiously, struggling to get the words out as the ammonia overwhelmed me. There were flies buzzing around, but they all seemed to be congregating around the couch, around her son. Didn't reply. I was scared. Scared of what I'd see sitting on the couch. Was he dead? Was her son the cause of that awful stench? And then I saw it laying on the couch. Then I saw it, laying there on the couch like a washed-up whale in summer. A rotund mass which used to be a man, swollen with rot and gas, enshrined in mustard-stained sheets and liquefied fat. There were mountains of maggots basking in the chaos of seeping flesh and rotting bed sores. I couldn't see the legs. It seemed to me that they had fused together with the couch. The piles of excrement served as a goopy glue to aid the cursed marriage of man and couch. Holy fucking shit. I stumbled backwards, knocking over my cleaning trolley. I wondered how long ago he died. To have rotted away like that, too fucking long ago. No wonder there were rats. Beatrice was crackers, more crackers than the druggies who lived on South Street, who would live with Big Bobby's corpse for a week. Then I heard it again. The fingers on buttons, the mashing of the controller, the TV still on, and a lone shooter sniping from some hill in pixelated Beirut. Motherfucker was still alive. Just as I realized it, he let out a large groan and twisted his horrifying mask to look at me. There were shackles, or his ankles should have been, buried under blankets of pillowy soft flesh. If I touched his skin, I imagined it would come slewing off the bone like a well-cooked Christmas turkey. Yeah, he mouthed at me. It was all he could do, and it seemed to take him a lot to say. His jowls shook as he said it. His rotted teeth clattered. Now, it was too late. I woke up a few hours later. Across from the rotted mass of her son, there had been a small couch, two-seater. It was in the same gaudy print as the other one, looked new and was untarnished by rot. I woke up there, my bloodied head resting on the arm of the chair. Beatrice was beside me with her frying pan she must have walloped me with. I tried to move, but my legs were shackled together. Don't panic, my lovely. Everything's all right. I did tell you not to come in here. I don't have many valuables. I'm sure that's what you were looking for, right? I don't hire drug addicts to clean my house without hiding my precious things first. Now, don't worry. I'm here to help, she smiled. We all have our vices. Mine is tea. I could drink it all day. My Connor here loves his yell of duty, or whatever it's called. I live to please. What is it you want? I thought about all the shit I'd seen. A man fused into a couch, rotted to the point where he resembled nothing but a lump of flesh. Things no one should ever have to see. Run. I wanted to leave. I wanted to not have eyes. I wanted to feel good again, unmarred by trauma. I wanted the smell of ammonia out of my nose. I wanted... Charlie, I sputtered. I realized Beatrice would not know what Charlie was. I want cocaine. I want to get high. Of course, my lovely. Your mummy will get it for you, she smiled. All you have to do is stay right here, and I will take care of you. It's pretty funny when you think about it. Could be a lot worse. I mean, there are children starving in Africa and junkies with no fix. Who am I to complain? I don't have to do anything for a hit anymore. Hi there, my lovelies. This is Beatrice. My little darling loves writing stories, so I gave him a notebook and pen to pass the time. I decided to post this here. He does love to exaggerate, that little rascal. I'm not sure if this is the right place for it, but I do love to please. I feel very strongly that everyone deserves to have their voice heard. With that being said, would any of you lovelies be interested in a cleaning job? £200 cash in hand. I'll supply the cleaning supplies. I can be very generous. There's some extra money in it for you if you're good at digging holes. My poor garden has gotten out of hand. See you soon. Beatrice. I work in a hospital call center. It's not great work, but it pays the bills. Though you may not think it. You get a lot of calls during an 8-hour shift, usually just people trying to find a relative who might be there, or someone trying to schedule an appointment in the surgery department, or maybe even people seeking medical advice. I'm apparently not qualified to do any other things, so the job became a lot of telling people one moment while I transfer you, and then they're either sent to the desired department or not, and you get to talk to them again, except less polite. You get a lot of angry people, too, most of them looking for billing department because the hospital dared to charge them for their services. Those people are best sent off quickly before they can get a good head of steam under them, you know. There are 4 to 6 of us in the basement at any given time. It's mostly college kids trying to pay their bills, older people looking for a little extra on top of Social Security. All in all, I think around 10 of us work the switchboard, and you get to know your coworkers pretty well when there's so few of you. We take turns covering the midnight shift. Most of us work in the day or mid-shift primarily. And at the end of the month, we all walk away with a nice chunk of overtime for our trouble. People being people. There's always 12 or 16 hours of overtime a month. No one minds much. The job's easy, and I used to really like having a job where I could finish my schoolwork or play on my phone for 8 to 16 hours, and I could still get paid. That was before the heavy breather. Not a week went by where he didn't get at least one notation in the logbook. The notations were supposed to be for strange or unusual calls. For the last few months, most of the entries had been a heavy breather. We had named the caller because their calls were all pretty much the same. You'd pick up the phone, you'd hear the telltale heavy breathing on the other end, and know what was going on. We all just figured it was some pervert, some lonely sicko trying to get his rocks off to someone on the other end, and you'd hang up before he could get the satisfaction, make a note of it in the logbook. Now, I say these things like they were regular occurrences, but in truth, I had yet to get the mystery caller myself. Every other operator had gotten them at least twice, sometimes 3 or 4, but I never managed to see what all the fuss was about. Well, I would get my wish 3 days later. 3 days of midnights? My boss shrugged at me as she sank the push pins into the bulletin board. She posted our schedule by hand every week, despite the rest of the hospital having access to electronic payroll systems that generates the schedule for the week. Martha is old school. Probably been here since they pulled her out of the foundation when they broke ground. She's one of the best bosses that I've ever had. Doesn't like how short-handed we are any more than we do. Sorry. Roger says he's taking the weekend off to go visit his boyfriend. He's always doing this on such short notice. I swear I'd have fired him on the spot if we weren't so short-handed. Still, I protested. All 3 nights? You're the only one with an open schedule, kid? I'll give you next week off if you want it. Scout's honor. Martha made the promise so freely that I took her up on it in a heartbeat. A promise from Martha was worth its weight in gold. I mean, she couldn't have known that this would likely be the last weekend I ever sat behind the desk. Friday night went normally. I arrived at 11 p.m., brewed a thermos of coffee, got to my desk around 11:15. Jordan and Aiden were there, finishing up their calls or cleaning up their stations as they waited for midnight. We chatted a little as I logged on, discussing call volumes and talking about tonight's call-in schedule. Apparently, there was a team I needed to call in at 4 a.m. for a 5 a.m. case. They added the heavy breather had been calling a lot today. They don't say anything. They just keep calling about once an hour like they're looking for someone. Pam swears she heard them say a name before they hung up, but Pam likes to make stuff up for attention. Got a little excited when Jordan told me that. If they were calling more often, then maybe I'd get to talk to them. I mean, I know it's weird to hope that a crazy pervert will call up and breathe on the phone, but I really wanted the experience. I felt like it would make me like everyone else, and I was a little sore that I hadn't gotten them yet. I'd get my wish about an hour later. It was about 12:30 when they called. I was sitting in the call center basement, sipping coffee, checking Reddit on my phone, when I heard the computer chirp and inform me that I had a call. It was from an unlisted number, not that uncommon, so I picked it up without thinking much of it. When I picked it up, it sounded like someone was sitting too close to a fan. The blowing was annoying, but I was a professional. I tried to power through it. Southwest Medical Center, how may I help you? The noise on the other end sounded slightly different. I realized all at once that it was the rain coming down hard on a window somewhere. I mean, it hadn't been when I came in. Hadn't been a cloud in the sky. The rain covered it slightly, but as I sat in silence, I began to hear the deep breathing on the other end. There he was. There was the weird caller. Hello? Southwest Medical, can I help you? The breathing persisted, overtopped by the rain that hit hard on the windows of wherever they were. I reached for the book to start scribbling down the usual message when I heard something over the phone. I heard a voice. I'm sorry? I asked, taken aback. It's always dark here. The pen fell out of my hand. No one had ever heard this person talk before. It was always just a heavy breathing for a couple of minutes before they hung up. Had they been waiting for something? I wondered for a moment if they'd talked before and maybe no one had told me. Was I the first one that they'd talked to? It's always dark here, they repeated. And this time I stopped thinking and started listening. Who are you? I asked, not sure what else to say. The rain is so loud tonight, they said. The voice was neither male nor female and sounded low and growly like someone getting over a cold. Look, I'm not sure who you are, but you've called a hospital. If you need some help, I'll be happy to help you, but otherwise I need to... Cherish says hi, the voice whispered. That made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I had a sister named Cherish. She was about 12, as far as I knew. She was asleep at my parents' house. I shook off the fear and I began to become angry. I mean, whoever this was, they were obviously having a laugh on my account. It really wasn't funny. Who is this? Roger, if this is you, then I swear to God, I'm going to go to HR. This isn't even a little bit funny and you need to stop. That's when the line went dead. I held the phone against my ear for a few more seconds before putting in the cradle and looking around nervously. I expected Roger or Jordan to pop out of the break room with their cell phone laughing because they had spooked me. All the company I got, though, was the sound of the air conditioning cycling overhead. I sat for a few more minutes, drumming my fingers, trying to forget the call. The more I thought about it, the weirder it got, though. My coworkers would have called back to make fun of me if this had been a prank, but and if it wasn't them, then some stranger on the phone had called up and said my sister's name. I mean, coincidence or not, I needed to be sure. My mom picked up on the fourth ring, and I could hear Dad grumbling in the background. Hello? She asked blearily. Mom? Hey, sorry, is Cherish okay? I know it's a weird question, but... I could hear Mom sitting up in bed. You okay? You sound upset. Please just answer me. Is Cherish okay? I don't know, hon. She's at sleepaway camp this weekend. My blood ran cold. Hey, I need you to call down there and make sure she's okay. Hun, what's all this about? She asked groggily. I got a weird call a minute ago, and now I have to make sure that she's okay. My phone rang. I looked at the number. Unknown name and unknown number. Couldn't be them again. Mom, I need to call you back. Just promise that you'll call the camp, make sure she's okay. Mom said that she would. I hung up. I picked up the incoming call. I was immediately bombarded by the sound of rain on glass and muffled heavy breathing. The caller's voice sounded watery, slurry, like they'd been choked on some water. They sounded like someone with a sore throat and a bad case of pneumonia. Like a drowned person. Hello? Hello? Who is this? Cherish needs your help. I gritted my teeth and tried not to scream into the phone. Whoever this is, you need to stop. I'm not amused. You're not funny. I want you to... He's gone to get her. She thinks he's her friend, but he isn't. He wants to hurt her. You have to stop her. Who's gone to get her? The woodsman. He's a bad man, and he wants your sister. I didn't have the slightest idea who this person was talking about. Whatever their game was, I was starting to freak out. Look, this isn't funny. If this is a joke or something, it's really gone to... The line went dead, and I was left with static. I spent the next hour in a fitful state. I didn't want to call Mom back and bother her with this, but what if whoever that wasn't kidding around? I mean, surely my sister wasn't stupid enough to just go off with someone in the woods, right? I didn't know. The lack of knowledge made me nervous. I began to feel the walls of the basement closing in on me. The claustrophobic feeling made me shake. When the phone rang again, I caught it on the first ring without even looking. Hello? I could hear the quaver in my voice. The rain was softer now, but the voice was no less intrusive. He has her! It all but screamed at me. I thought I could hear someone in the background crying and screaming just under the raspy husk. He's hurting her! Please hurry! Where are you? I screamed, leaning forward as though I could fall into the computer screen. Where has he taken her? If this was a prank, I was buying in hook, line, and sinker. I could hear someone, a small girl, it sounded like, screaming and crying as someone did God knows what to her. My cell phone roared to life. I looked down to see that it was Mom and picked it up without thinking. Mom was hysterical on the other end. She and Dad were in the car, driving up to the camp. The counselors had gone to check on Cherish and found her bed empty. What's more, they found muddy boot tracks going into her cabin and then leaving out the same way. They can't seem to track them. The rain here has been torrential, but the state police are bringing in tracking dogs and they're going to get started as soon as they can. She's in the woods, Mom. Someone has her, I sputtered, still hearing the screams on the phone. Mom was silent for a few breaths. How do you know that? I got a caller on the phone who says that she's alive, but it sounds like he's hurting her and they're in the woods, Mom. Tell them to search the woods. She hung up on me, and when I picked up the phone, it had gone dead again. I sat in silence and felt utterly impotent. Should I leave? Should I go get help? Should I help them look? My job wasn't really the thing holding me here. I was sure people would understand if I abandoned my post, but I was hoping that the mystery caller would give me more information. Every second counted now. If my information could help them find her a little quicker, then all the better. I muddled through a few late-night calls while I waited, and I'm sure the people on the other end could tell that I was tense. After an hour, Mom called to let me know that they had arrived. The rain had made it very difficult for the dogs to find the trail, but they had started searching the woods anyway. The police were confident they could locate her, but Mom wasn't so sure. She sounded scared and tired and just plain defeated. When she hung up, I stared at the phone on the desk and willed the mystery caller to call me. I'd been so chatty before. Why had they gone silent now? I pulled up call logs on my computer and started trying to find the number. No name, no number was all I ever got, though. I know in movies the police could easily decode these private numbers, but I work for a hospital, not even the emergency part of the hospital. My resources were limited to what I could do on the out-of-date computer I had been given to work with. When the phone rang 20 minutes later, I looked at the number and almost knocked it off the desk in my haste. No name, no number. Hello? Hello? Where are you? I need you to... He's killing her. The voice whispered harshly. He's trying to make it last, but he's killing her. Where are you? The police are looking for her, but I need to know where you are. The voice went silent for a moment, and I thought that I had lost them again. On the other end, I could hear whimpering, and the person making those noises sounded broken. Hot tears ran down my face as I listened to what could be my sister's final breaths. I began to beg the voice to tell me where they were. I laid my head against the desk and cried, letting the tears flow as the voice seemed to contemplate how to answer me. When I played here, it was about a mile from the camp. Over the creek, past the blackberry fields, and up a little hill. His house is at the top of that hill. I have been here for so long, though. I don't know if any of those things are still there. Please hurry. She doesn't have much longer. The line went dead. I called my mom. I gave her the information. When she relayed it to some of the counselors, they knew exactly where she was talking about. The house belonged to the groundskeeper, and he had lived there for a long time. She said the police were on their way to check on it. She asked me to thank the person on the phone if they called back. I waited for an hour, another long and agonizing hour, and when the cell phone rang, the number made my skin crawl. Unknown name, unknown caller. Were they calling my cell phone this time? I mean, that seemed unlikely. When I picked it up, I was greeted not by the raspy voice of a sick child, but by the stony voice of an officer, Darroway from the state police. He told me they'd found Cherish and the groundskeeper in his cabin. He's not in a good way. The bastard uses time. that he had for some pretty upsetting things. She's alive. We're sending her by life flight to the nearest hospital. That's the one you work at, I believe. I thanked him. Told him to tell my parents that I'd be waiting for her when she got here. Mom tells us you've been in contact with another child and they gave you directions to find your sister. Yeah, she called out of the blue. I don't know how they knew my number. He was silent for a moment. You forgive me for saying so. That seems highly unlikely. I started. How do you mean? Groundskeeper didn't have a phone in his cabin. His cell phone was on his person when we recovered him. There's no one else in the cabin. That's impossible. They said that they'd been there for a very long time. They've been calling for weeks. Look, I appreciate you helping us find your sister. This whole story seems very far-fetched. That being said, I don't think we would have found your sister without your help. I want to take a statement from you when we get there. But just know that we don't consider you in any way connected to this, despite the oddness of your claim. I thanked him. He thanked me before hanging up. I was getting ready to call Marta, 6 a.m. person who should be coming in early to retrieve me, when a familiar caller popped up on my screen. No name, no number. I picked it up as I prepared to thank the caller for their help. I just started thanking them when I heard the heavy breathing on the other end stop. The sound was completely different. The caller had a husky voice to his breathing, and you could clearly hear their breaths jagging up and down as they went about whatever they were doing. This wasn't a child's breathing, but this was an adult. I hung up the call before I could think about it too much. I sat there in a daze as I pulled the call log towards me. I logged a heavy breather, but I thought for a moment about recording the other calls too. I mean, they had saved my sister's life, whoever they've been. Thought better of adding them to the log. I called Marta. I told her what had happened. She agreed to come in for me. Said I'd see her soon before I hung up. I'm sitting with my sister in the ICU as I write this, but I can't help but wonder who that mystery caller was. I mean, how did they call me? How did they know where to find me? My sister's heavily sedated right now, but I'm a little afraid of what she might tell me when she comes to. Does she know who the caller is? Did she tell them how to contact me? I'm afraid to go back to work now. I'm afraid of who else might call me when I'm manning the desk again. What other lost souls might be just a phone call away? When Damien first approached me saying he needed a business partner for his new company, I agreed in a heartbeat. He was always the ingenious one and the entrepreneurial one of the two of us. In business school, he had gotten straight A's, while I struggled to pass even the most rudimentary courses. He was always coming up with clever ideas. I got something that's going to solve the world's food problems, he told me, going over his written proposal. When I saw what he actually had planned, I second-guessed his thinking. People will never go for this in North America, I said. We'll be bankrupt within a year. And he just smiled and laughed. Leave the marketing side of the things to me, he told me. I'll work. I'll make sure we have customers. I just need you to worry about the money. Numbers bored Damien. He always told me that he hated that side of things. Coming up with the ideas was where he shined. He hated counting money, he preferred spending it. Accounting was the one class in college that I managed to get a better grade than him. So, we started up our business. And you've definitely heard of it. You've eaten our products unless you're one of a small minority who abstains through the worldwide craze of cricket cuisine. We quickly became the leading insect-based food supplier in the Western market. And then, the world. That's right, Damien's big idea was crickets. He wanted to solve the world's food crisis by raising mass amounts of them to be turned into an edible product. And now you can see why I tried to talk him out of it at first. But I believed in Damien a lot more than I believed in the idea. And I was just happy to be involved with anything that he was planning. In business school, we had all imagined him as the next Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. He was a genius. Born before his time, we all said. We had no idea who he really was, or what he was really capable of. The company started off small. I mean, at first, it was just me and Damien. I took care of finances, he took care of everything else. It was fascinating to watch him work up close. There was an inhuman speed and ingenuity with everything he did. It was as if he didn't need to sleep. All he ever did was work on the company, crossing items after items off of his never-ending whiteboard list of ideas. Within a few months, we had more customers than we could handle. The concept of alternative protein sources appealed to environmentalists and animal rights activists alike. Surprisingly, some vegetarians who were opposed to eating meat were willing to eat our bugs in order to satisfy their inherent need for protein. Crickets were our best sellers, and we covered them in chocolate and chipotle seasoning, salt and vinegar, and barbecue. Deep fried, oven roasted, low calorie, and lemon flavored. We tried everything. The business kept getting bigger, and every month we sold more than the month before. After a while, even Damien couldn't keep up with the expansion. For a while, it seemed like he didn't sleep at all, just stayed up all night filling orders, his eyes beginning to turn red from the insomnia, and I told him he needed to start delegating more. He reluctantly agreed. We began to hire a few people to work with us, mostly to keep with packaging. Soon we were running out of places to store crickets from. Damien had the idea that we should breed our own. But crickets need food, and that meant we needed to provide it for them. We needed a garden just for the crickets, a greenhouse full of plants for them to feast on. And our business boomed even more after that, with no limit to our supply. We dominated the alternative protein market as it displaced one traditional source after another. We brought in cricket breeder experts. They multiplied and multiplied, filling the greenhouse to the brim with their chirping bodies. Our domination of the alternative protein market was quick and brutal. We beat out the Beyond Meat product line, as Damien's patented chirping burgers recipe was delicious. Nobody cared that it contained crickets at that point. It was accepted, just as much as eating chicken or beef. Pretty soon you were looked down upon if you ordered a regular beef burger at a restaurant. Just wasn't trendy anymore to eat chicken, steak, or pork chops. All the big chains began calling to source our premium cut line. It helped that the products are mouth-watering and addictive. Nobody knew what Damien was putting in the cricket mixture, and nobody cared. Even the FDA didn't seem bothered. I was amazed every day as he expanded our product line, starting out with burgers and hot dogs and moving on to wings, cricket fingers, cricket chips, and cricket ice creams. Everyone was on board, pretty much. As one celebrity after another began to advertise for us. You probably saw the television spots. They ran all day, all night. YouTube ads were just as common. I couldn't believe Damien had actually done it. He had made a successful worldwide enterprise out of crickets. But he wasn't stopping there. "Get ready for phase 2, he told me one night on the phone. I asked him what that meant, and he just told me I'd have to wait and see. Like everybody else. Our garden had gotten to the size of a small city. As it moved from indoors to outdoors, we just couldn't accommodate the crickets in a greenhouse anymore. Damien said it was too impractical, but they would stick close to their food source, and they wouldn't spread beyond the borders of their property. He assured me of that. "Leave it to me," he said. "Have I ever let you down before?" Still hard. Our neighbors weren't happy about it, and soon they were seeing their crops devastated by the crickets straying outside of our company's borders. Damien was on it, though. He just bought up the other farms, expanding our lot size until nobody was complaining anymore. Anybody who considered it thought twice about it. I mean, if they wanted to keep their land. I was asking him one day about the plans for phase 2. He told me it was already in progress. I'd start seeing news of it any day now. And he was right. The very next day, I saw the news reports about the locusts taking over the Northwest. spraying across the country in a path of destruction that was decimating everything, like a plague from the Book of Revelations. I went out to our gardens to look at the crickets. It had been so long since I'd been out there. There were so many of the bugs everywhere now that I preferred to stay inside, away from them, where it was safe and comfortable. I marched out through the hazy swarm of shiny black legs and glistening, fluttering wings and fat torsos. And I saw we'd not been breeding crickets for some time now. Damien's phase 2 was in effect, and he had found a bigger bug, a better source of protein. Or maybe he had other reasons for breeding enough locusts to decimate the entire world's food supply, making everyone completely reliant on him. The locusts are swarming me. They're everywhere. They're thickest here at the heart of where it all began, and they cover my face. I feel them. I could feel them filling my nostrils, scampering and skittering across my eyelids and into my ears. I don't know why. But I open my mouth. I open it wide, as if I'm hungry, starving, even though I feel sick to my stomach and I want to throw up. They begin to clamber into me, going down through my gaping maw and skittering down my esophagus. They flood in with their slick and shimmering black bodies, their hairy, pointy legs abrasive against my windpipe as they suffocate me. The world's food crisis is over. We will all be full very soon. Damien will see to that. With nothing to work with but pure darkness, my imagination filled in the blanks with the worst images I could conjure. Gore-stained walls, mangled bodies, probably a skull or something impaled on a pike. I thought of bugs, too. Every time I heard something skitter and splash, every squeak and growl that echoed off the cave walls, I imagined bugs, larger than life, cockroaches the size of dogs, probably like a swarm of those flesh-eating scarabs from the Mummy movies. Under all of that, beneath the smell of death and decay, there was a steady undertone of moaning. Most of my fellow prisoners were perfectly content to wail in agony, but one was, as always, extra talkative. Okay, I spy with my little eye something black. Jerry, I said, trying to let him down gently. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I don't think this is really a great time for that game. Okay, how about another round of 20 questions? I sighed. His cheerfulness on the face of certain death was relentless. Okay, sure. Person, place, or thing? Things. He was always so bad at this game. Is it the spider demons? Damn, dude. You sure you're not psychic anymore? If I was psychic, would I have let you talk me into going on this ghost tour in the first place? Touché. Another voice cut into our discussion. This one sounded as annoyed as I felt. Will you two shut up already? You shut up, Brenda. Jerry snapped back. I'm on vacation. If I want to play games until the spider demons come back to finish us off, then I'm going to play goddamn games until the goddamn spider demons come back to finish us off. A new voice, this one raspy and old, arose from the other side of the cavern. Up until this point, I didn't even realize there was anyone left alive over there. They're not going to finish us off, he said. Excuse me? I asked. The monsters. And they're not demons either, by the way. They're creatures that evolved from a tragedy in these woods a century ago. Oh, Jerry sang. Story time. Let's go, Mr. Creepy Voice. Y'all aren't from around here, said Mr. Creepy Voice. So it makes sense that you're never heard of the legend, but I grew up with him. Never paid him any mind until the summer I saw the spider people myself. Couldn't help but notice that as he spoke, the incessant wails and moans of the other prisoners seemed to diminish, almost like everyone was ignoring their pain just a little to listen to the old man's tale. Long ago, there was a company out this way. Some folks say they made chemicals. Some say it was secretly the government testing out new poisons. See, this is before the big war. This is before science had a chance to catch up to humanity's ambitions. Back then, there were always men looking for shortcuts, Jerry added. You scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could, didn't stop to think if they should. Exactly, said Mr. Creepy Voice. He almost sounded impressed. That's a really good way to say it. Thanks. Made it up myself. Like you said, they didn't stop to think. The result of whatever they were doing came in the form of a bunch of children being born with defects. 6 eyes, jawbones shaped like mandibles, extra limbs, horrors to behold. Oh my God, exclaimed Brenda. Those were the things that attacked our bus. What happened to them? I asked. People around here didn't have much. Corporation offered to buy the kids outright, turned the factory into an orphanage. But really, it was more like an asylum. Them kids grew up being tested and experimented on by the same damn fools who cursed them into looking the way they did in the first place. Until one day. Jerry continued grunting next to me like he was lifting weights, which would have been impossible, considering he was, just like the rest of us, trapped inside a waxy cocoon. In fact, the only parts of our bodies not secured beneath a 1-inch thick layer of itchy resin-like material were our heads. I assumed he was just doing something weird, always a safe assumption with him, and ignored the noises while Mr. Creepy Voice continued his story. Legend says it was a flash flood what knocked out the power. Backup couldn't get to the asylum for 3 days. When they arrived, they found all the doctors and scientists dead, bites taken out of them. And the kids, they were still kids at the time, were nowhere to be seen. Strangest thing about the bodies left behind, none of them had any fingers left. Jerry let out a gasp of relief, then whispered my name like he had an urgent secret to tell me, but didn't want to interrupt the story. Jack, Brenda asked. They never found the kids? But they must be ancient by now. It ain't the same kids, Mr. Creepy Voice explained. See, they grew up in them woods, and malformed or not, they're still people. And eventually, they did what people do, and when their babies get old enough, they started having babies too. It's been generation after generation, inbreeding, getting more and more feral, less and less respect for the laws of man, or God. Hey, Jack, Jerry whispered again. What is it? I whispered back. I got my fingers into my pocket and reached the keychain. Had to use some power thrusting to get into place, but this is why I trained every day. Good for you, I said. The implication of his accomplishment hadn't settled in for me yet. I was still giving most of my attention to the older man and his story. They keep to themselves, content to snack on the occasional camper or lost hiker. But in recent years, the droughts forced most of the wildlife to leave the mountain. The spider folk can't find their regular meals, so they come closer to the edge of their domain. They snag a victim or two, and they eat them. Wait, how is it that nobody has gone looking for all these victims? I asked. Well, that's the thing, he answered. They don't kill people. Brenda and I asked at the same time. What? No, they ain't never killed no one since the flood. What they do is they take you, they eat your fingers, and they let you go. People in town, we all just assume they were stories. You go out near the woods, come back missing a few fingers, probably just an accident. Rockfall or something. Rockfall? I said incredulously. What does that even mean? Look, Mr. Creepy Voice said in a voice that sounded like he was angry, or ashamed, or both. It's complicated, okay? There's politics involved. Most of us are good people. We don't like talking politics. We just want life to be nice and quiet. What good is arguing gonna do? I'm confused, I said. What kind of politics could possibly... You know what? Never mind. Let me backtrack. Are you saying the spider monsters aren't going to kill us? No, it's much worse than that. They're keeping us in here, in this black as night cave, because they want to keep their meat fresh. And when the time comes, when they get hungry, they're gonna come in here and eat our fingers, Brenda gasped. Wait, Jerry said. They're gonna eat our fingers? Then kill us, right? No, Mr. Creepy Voice responded. They're gonna let us go. But only after they've eaten all of our fingers. So, I was still trying to work it all out in my head. How is that worse than death? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not thrilled about the idea of getting my fingers eaten, but given the choice between that and death... Yada! Yata! Jerry cheered with delight. The moans of pain were silent, and in that silence, the only noise that could be heard was a soft... Shick, shick, shick. What is that? Jerry could barely contain his excitement. I got the knife to open on my keychain. Had to rip a hole in my pocket, but... That's when I realized the noise I was hearing was Jerry steadily cutting his way out of his cocoon confinement. Now that I got yet another hole in my pants, I'm able to say... The sawing noise stopped. There was a jingle of keys moving around, then a click. And then... Let there be light! The cave was suddenly illuminated from the beam of light shining forth from Jerry's crotch hole. The tiny alien-shaped keychain flashing he'd picked up from the Roswell gift shop was probably the equivalent of a light source of a Bic lighter. But after spending hours in the pitch black, it may as well have been a spotlight. In that moment, I realized two things. First, my imagination actually wasn't that far off from reality. No skulls on pikes, but there was plenty of dried blood painted on the cave walls. Bugs skittered away from Jerry's crotch light like it was a radioactive blast. Fortunately, there wasn't any dead bodies. The smell of rotting flesh was coming from the other, still living victims. And second, Rosa was never going to let us live this down. It had been a couple of months since we began this road trip, and in that time, the number of disasters we'd encountered was... Well, let's just call it above average. We don't go looking for trouble, but trouble sure seems to come looking for us. We just escaped another fiasco by the skin of our teeth before landing here in this quiet mountain town on our way to visit my friend Claire on the other side of the country. My plan was to lay low, patch up the bullet holes in our van, and relax for a day or two. Nothing crazy. No sewer exploration. No chasing a ball of light into a graveyard. No following any creepy little girls into any mysterious abandoned farmhouses. We have learned our lessons. So when Jerry found the flyer for mountain ghost tours in our motel lobby, Rosa thought that we would know better than ask if we felt like taking a little excursion for the evening. The two of them got into a small fight over it, nothing serious. She rightly pointed out that he was testing his luck. He rightly pointed out that the odds of us encountering another horrifying life or death event during the span of a sketchy 3-hour tour was astronomical. As always, I was called upon to be an arbiter. And as always, I made the wrong choice. Hindsight is such a jerk, isn't it? While Rosa went to watch the new Thor movie, Jerry and I bought our tickets and climbed aboard a bus for what was supposed to be a tourist trap. We barely made it out of town when the bus was attacked by the spider folk. By the time Rosa got out of the theater, we were already slathered up in viscous booger goo and plopped inside the deep, dark cave. With Jerry's alien light illuminating every horrible detail, I tried to focus on the humanity of our situation. There were at least 12 of us in here. Brenda, who we'd already met on the bus, was right next to us. So too were the other tourists, and then there were others. A few barely clinging to consciousness. Dirty, bloody, tired. The worst of these was the man across from me, Mr. Creepy Voice. He had an unkempt gray beard and a face full of wrinkles. Unlike the others, his arms weren't bound by the cocoons any longer. Instead, his scabbed, scarred hands hung limply at his side. One contained nothing but an index finger and a thumb. The other, nothing but a middle finger. Jesus, I said without thinking. Mr. Creepy Voice cracked a smile. I haven't been happy to see the light in a long time. Squeak! Jerry cut the light off instantly. The noise came from the front of the cave and sounded like something between human and animal. It was the same sound those spider creatures made as they crawled into the tour bus through every open window before blasting us all with that webbing goop. Oh, Brenda yelled. They're coming back! The darkness didn't last long. A different kind of light filled the room. Distorted shadows glittered over the irregular cavern walls. Squee! 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 As the hissing noise grew, the shadows came into focus. A creature walking upright with 6 limbs and a giant head. And then I saw it. The backlit silhouette of a spider person. Behind him, another spider person carried a lantern, the same kind of lantern they had when they dragged us down here in the first place. The chorus of pain and suffering rose into a crescendo. The people in the cave pleaded and begged. Before I knew what was happening, the monsters had made their selection and began eating. They freed their victims' hands with those disgusting mandibles, then chomped away at fingers like a horse going through sugar cubes. Jerry and I were spared, but not everyone was so lucky. Mr. Creepy Voice got the worst of it. They ate his last remaining digits, then vomited that white goo onto his wounds. It instantly hardened into the rest of his cocoon, and then, just as suddenly, the creatures turned and walked away, leaving us in darkness once again. "Oh, that sucked," Jerry said, flicking his flashlight back on. Through gritted teeth, Mr. Creepy Voice said, "It is what it is." As pointless as it was to ask, I felt compelled to do so anyway. "Are you okay?" "I knew it was only a matter of time," he said. "But now at least my suffering's almost over. They'll be back once the wounds are healed, and then they'll let me go." "Hang on a sec," Jerry said. The flashlight beam went wild as he began a pelvic thrust. With each movement, he made a triumphant "Hiya!" noise. It took me a second to realize that his keychain pocket knife was steadily cutting a larger and larger hole in the cocoon. I dared to let myself feel hope. "Wait!" Old Man Creepy Voice said. "Stop that! What are you doing? The spider folk ain't gonna like that!" Jerry took a second to catch his breath, his hand already free up to his wrist, giving him plenty of maneuverability at this point to continue carving the cocoon. "Well," he said, looking the man dead in the eyes, "I guess they'll have to die mad about it." With that, he began feverishly shaking his knife hand, splitting the cocoon open down the middle, releasing his arm past the elbow, cutting all the way up to his neck, then with a loud frack, he pulled himself free and flopped out onto the disgusting bloody floor, which he then kissed. "Oh, sweet freedom!" He stood up, wiping the grime off of his face, then turned to look at me and said, "Rosa cannot know about this." "I won't say a word if you don't." "Great, let's get the heck out of here." As he got to work sawing through my cocoon, he tried to offer the rest of the victims some assurance. "Don't worry, I want to get everyone out of here." "No!" shouted Creepy Voice. "You can't! There's not enough time. Those things will be back soon. Just go. Leave us. Save yourself." "What?" Brenda asked. Creepy Voice continued. "Most of us are too weak to make the walk back down the mountain. We need to stay here." "Youch!" I shouted as Jerry's blade tip went too deep and scraped a rib. "Oh, sorry, buddy. Did I get you?" "It's fine. Get me out of here." I would have told him to slow down and be more careful, but I had a bad feeling that something was going to happen. Something even worse than the spider monster kidnapping. I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was, but I knew I wanted to leave the cave before whatever was about to happen could happen. He finished his cut and pried open the plaster-like cocoon. It stuck to my skin and clothes like crazy glue, but eventually managed to tear myself free. As soon as I was out, I started looking for a tool so I could help cut everyone else free. "Uh-oh," Jerry said as the light began to dim. "Looks like we're almost out of juice." "I said go!" Creepy Voice shouted angrily. "Take your friend! Run away while you still have a chance! You only got enough battery power to reach the opening of the cave. If you stay here, we'll all die, and all of this will be for nothing." Something about that sentence tickled the weird part of my brain that made me stop everything I'm doing and say, "Hang on, what?" "Just leave us!" With a heavy sigh, Jerry said, "Okay, fine, we'll go get help. We'll be back to rescue all of you." "No!" A heavy silence fell upon the room. I looked at everyone's faces. They were all looking at the old man for an explanation. He huffed and grit his teeth, and scowled as drool poured out of his mouth into his beard. "What's really going on?" I asked. "It's not fair." Jerry stepped forward. "What's not fair?" "I got captured same as you. How is it fair that you get rescued with all your fingers, but I got all 10 of mine bitten off?" "Dude, we're trying to save your life," I explained. "They ain't gonna kill me," he responded in a vicious tone. "They already ate my fingers. They're gonna come back later once I'm good and healed, and they're gonna let me go." "How do you know that?" Brenda asked. "'Cause that's what they do. They ate my neighbor Nate's fingers last year. My cousin Earl got his fingers ate back in high school. Even my first wife Edna had her fingers taken when she was camping in '04. It sucks, but it's what happens." "Hold up," I said. The mystery was finally revealing itself to me in the worst possible way. "Are you saying multiple people have already been here to this cave and had their fingers eaten? This has been going on for a while, and what people just don't do anything about it? They knew where the cave was, and they still let people come out here? Calm down, he said without a shred of irony. It's just the way it is. It's the way it's always been. Well, that's gonna end now, I said. We're gonna go get the police. We're gonna bring them back here. Don't you fucking dare. The police around here are public servants. My tax dollars pay for it. And I don't feel like having to pay more in taxes just so you entitled millennials get to escape with all your fingers. Wait a second, one of the other voices said. Jerry shined the dying light towards the middle-aged man in the corner of the room. He wasn't from our tour bus, and judging by the bloodstains on his cocoon, he'd probably already lost a digit or two on each hand. Are you saying we're gonna have to pay more taxes if they get a rescue team? No, I said. At exactly the same time, the creepy said, yes. He was louder than me and rattled on with his rant. The police have to come all the way out here. They're gonna buy extra gas, rent extra rescue equipment, probably have to waste a lot of ammo on the spider folk. And just think of all the overtime. Who's paying for all that wasted government spending, huh? Not these assholes over here with their fancy elitist flashlights on their liberal fucking keychains. This is just woke politics run amok. Okay, God damn it, dude, I shouted. It's got nothing to do with... What the fuck am I even arguing with you? The middle-aged man in the corner piped up again. Now hang on, I don't want to have to pay more in taxes. You won't, I tried to explain. The argument makes absolutely no sense. I'm a middle-class American. I haul cardboard cubes for a living. I can't afford a raise in my taxes. It's all cause of inflation. Now, I'm not trying to get political or nothing. Then don't, I said. Just shut up. We're trying to save you. A new voice, this one strangely high-pitched and Muppet-like, joined the conversation. You know who really benefits from these two losers bringing back a rescue party? Squeep, don't you? Jerry shined the light towards the one speaking. The man was sitting on a rock, scratching his mandible with one of his forearms. Who the fuck are you? Jerry asked. The name's Jordan, Squeep, and I think it's obvious. The only ones who would really benefit are the spider folk. Every one of us normal humans will have to pay the price, Squeep, while the spider folk reap the benefits. Jordan's right, shouted Creepy. Whose side are you on anyway? Okay, I said, fighting back a headache. You know, Jordan's a spider monster, right? I mean, look at him. He has 6 eyes. He's not even in a cocoon. He is not your friend. He does not have your best interest in mind. Why are you listening to him? Of course he's human, argued the man in the corner. Look, he's wearing a hat. I looked back to see Jordan had, sure enough, put on a backwards ball cap. With the 3 eyes on the left side of his face, he winked at me. This is stupid, Jerry whispered. Yeah, I think, yeah, but I kind of want to see where it's going, though. Creepy wasn't done arguing yet. You know who else called the thing stupid? He said. I swear to God, if you say the Nazis! Nazis thought people were disagreeing with them were stupid, just like you! Explain to me how you're not a Nazi. Jerry leaned in and said, maybe we should just go. My flashlight really doesn't have that much longer. I don't think this conversation's gonna end the way you want it to. The man in the corner spoke up again. Hey, what about my son? I looked his way. Sorry, corner guy, I don't know what you're talking about. My son, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin. A teenager with jet black hair and an emo cut and mascara under his eyes tisked and said, whatever. Kevin got his thumb bit off. Oh, ain't that right, Kevin? So lame, Dad. Why did you even bring me here? Okay, I said, Kevin, do you want us to get you out of here while you still have 9 fingers? He tissed again and said, whatever, I guess. No way, said his father. No son of mine is going to take shortcuts. You signed the waiver to go on the bus tour. You have to pay the price, period. Squee! They're making a lot of good arguments, aren't they? Asked Jordan. Shut up, Spider. What's the matter? Squeep! You can't handle when someone destroys you with facts and logic? Typical snowflake. Jerry grabbed me by the shoulder and pulled me away from the nonsense. Okay, he said. We're going to leave now. And we'll be back, I said, with help. To save all of you. No! Screamed Creepy. It's not fair to those who already played by the rules. I did it the right way. I lost my fingers. I'm gonna get out. How is it fair you get to let everyone else out for free? Brenda started next. Can I say something? I've been listening to all of you, and I've got to say both sides are making good arguments. And if you really think about it, both sides are the same, right? But some of us are arguing for fairness. I think that's very reasonable. And even though I still have all my fingers, it wouldn't be fair to those who came before if I just got a free ride. I mean, what message does it send to our kids? Do whatever you want. No need to be careful and take precautions because the taxpayers will just bail you out whenever you get in trouble. Really? Is that what Joe Biden wants America to be? Tell you what, I said. How about we put it to a vote? Who here does not want us to get help? The creepy guy in the corner, the spider monster pretending to be human, and Brenda all signaled that they supported that plan. Okay. And who here does want us to get help? Everyone else in the room signaled that these idiots may have been the loudest, but they didn't represent the consensus. Very well. Think you're outvoted? We're gonna get help. Rigged vote! Shouted Creepy. Fake election! Shouted the man in the corner. I'm pretty sure we won, Brenda said calmly. Everyone I've talked to says they want to leave the spider folk alone. It's all about heritage and history, and you can't just trample all over that. Plus, there's mathematically no possible way your side won the vote without cheating. Oh, shit, Jerry said. I just remembered. I have a cell phone. The cell phone flashlight filled the cavern 1,000 times brighter than the weak little alien keychain. Jordan hissed and crawled away deeper in the cavern, on all 8 limbs. Oh, would you look at that? They actually have cell phone service in here. Nice. Our conversation with the 911 operator was made slightly more awkward by Creepy's incessant shouting in the background for them to leave us alone as Jerry dropped our GPS coordinates. Creepy howled about big government taking away his freedom to be left in the spider cave. In a refreshing turn of luck, the police delivered a response in record time. Within 30 minutes, there were helicopters circling the mountain, search and rescue teams carried those who couldn't walk to the awaiting ambulance, and some familiar men in suits and black vans rounded up the scattered spider people and hauled them away in the most anticlimactic ending imaginable. As I stood on the side of the mountain road, watching the containment unit scour the forest below for any errant spider people, Jerry walked up sipping from a mug. Hey, they got cocoa at the ambulance. You want any? Is there coffee? I can check. Right then, a van pulled up with the police line and stopped. Rosa got out with a smirk on her face, crossed below the police tape, and came up to join us. Well, she said, how was the ghost tour? Kind of disappointing, I answered. How was the new Thor movie? Same. Dang. Oh! Her eyes lit up as she remembered something. Y'all probably didn't hear, but while you were trapped in the cave, they passed a bill to cancel a ton of student loan debt. I'm not too ashamed to say that I made some stupid decisions in my teenage years. Most of them resulted in little more than scrapes and stories, though on more than one occasion I found myself in the back of a squad car pleading my case with an annoyed sheriff. No, me and my buddies would have told you that, for the most part, we were relatively harmless. But one day, early in my senior year, I had an experience that still haunts me. A memory that I can't look at directly without a wave of goosebumps sweeping over my skin. Travis was the one who suggested, of course. Travis, the undisputed king of horrible, awful, awesome ideas. Travis, who once suggested tying sleds to the back of his truck while he did burnouts in a snow-covered parking lot. It's been nearly 20 years, but I'm still picking pieces of gravel out of my elbows from that one. That's not the memory that keeps me up at night. I earned those mental scars on crisp fall afternoons, still a month from the year's first snow. Travis had approached me and 2 other friends after football practice, his trademark chipped front tooth making him seem like a crazed moonshiner. I know what we're doing tonight, he'd say. The hotel down Highway 43 got bed bugs. We're going there with Leah and her friends. I shot him a quizzical look. You want to get bed bugs? What are you, stupid? He asked. No. They're not gassing the bugs out until later this month. In the meantime, the entire place is deserted. We're going to go swimming in the indoor pool. My uncle worked on their AC system a few years back. He said they never locked the back door to the pool house. My still underdeveloped brain did a quick risk assessment. Not about whether we should trespass and risk arrest, but whether I'd be able to lie to my old man about our plans for the night. I figured it was about even odds, so I agreed. Travis swung by my place later that night in the truck. Unfortunately, my papa's out at a church activity. If he'd been home, maybe he would have stopped me. Maybe I wouldn't have gone into that pool. Maybe none of what was to follow would have happened. I suppose there's no point in going down the long list of what-ifs. I joined a half-dozen friends in the bed of his truck, holding on for dear life as he careened down Main Street. The night was warm for early October, but the wind whipping across the bed of the truck was still cold and crisp on my bare legs below my swim trunks. We passed by a house where Leah, Travis's girlfriend, was waiting along with a few more girls and 2 cases of beer. The hotel was dark when we arrived, its faded facade looking even more forlorn and forsaken than usual. Most of the windows had already been covered in the black plastic sheeting to prepare for the bed bug fumigation that would soon occur, cutting out almost all light. Not the pool house, though. No, the interior of the pool house shone with a faint neon green light. We poured out of the truck with our cans of beer, peering through the still-locked glass doors and the pool that lay beyond. The mysterious neon green light was emanating from a few exit signs hanging above the interior doors. Travis shook out his shoulders and ran at the fence, leaping over it with a few confident motions, before disappearing behind the pool house. A few seconds later, what sounded like a heavy door opened on the other side of the building. He reappeared inside the pool house under one of the exit signs, the hazy green washing out the color of his appearance. He approached the door where we waited, then popped it open with a grin that displayed his half-tooth. I'd like to tell you that I felt some sense of foreboding, that I was nervous, that I had some inkling of what was going to happen. Wish I'd felt something to clue me in. Maybe if I did, I'd feel better about swimming nowadays. I didn't. We all immediately jumped into the water in a cacophony of screams and shouts. A game of chicken was set up almost immediately. Jane, one of Leah's friends, hopped on my shoulders, fighting with Travis and Leah. We gave a valiant effort, but eventually lost when Travis swept my leg. At the time, it just felt like another night in a small Maine town. I got out of the water and downed another long sip of warm beer before walking over to the deep end. The signs along the side of the pool warned me, in no uncertain terms, that diving was prohibited, that the water was only 6 feet deep, that serious injury could occur, perhaps due to the pleasant tipsy sensation I was beginning to feel. I dove into the dark green water anyway. I opened my eyes underwater, expecting to see little more than green-tinged darkness, when instead of the dim bottom of the pool, I saw the shimmering surface of the water. And beyond that, bright lights. I swam toward it, immediately confused. Had I turned around somehow? And had someone turned on the lights? I rubbed the water from my eyes as my head broke the surface of the water, pure confusion taking over me. I was floating in a pool, but I was no longer in the pool house, surrounded by my friends. Instead, I was treading water in a brightly lit pit, flanked by 4 high square walls that extended up at least 40 feet to several large fluorescent lights on the ceiling above. I swam over to one of the walls looking for an exit or a place to rest. The walls consisted of smooth tiles and grout, the kind you'd see in a nice bathroom. I slowly swam around the 4 sides, but found no purchase, no exit, no markings of any kind. "Hello?" I shouted. My voice bounced off the walls, returning my own greeting back to me from every angle. "Is anyone here?" Again, my voice echoed back for nearly 10 seconds before fading into silence. Not silence. Even at this distance, the incessant buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead was faintly audible over the sound of my treading water. The next several minutes passed with me alternating between calling out for help, trying to wake up from whatever this nightmare was. My arms and legs were already beginning to ache. If I didn't get help soon, I'd drown. I thought back to my dive, back to when I'd first seen the shimmering surface of the water. I had seen it where I expected to see the bottom of the hotel pool. That didn't make sense to me, but a new thought suddenly occurred to me. I stuck my face into the water and looked down. The water was at least 20 feet deep, but at least it was clear. The tile walls continued down below the surface, and there, way down at the dark bottom of the pool, the ground shimmered, almost as if it was the surface of water. I felt myself begin to hyperventilate, so I took a deep breath and leaned to float on my back. The water rushed over my ears, replacing the sound of buzzing lights with a thunderous pulse of my own heartbeat. I floated on my back for what felt like an eternity, but it was probably no more than 90 seconds, when my heart rate had slowed from the thundering to merely drumming. I took a deep breath, then dove down and began swimming towards the shimmering surface far below me. The pressure built up in my ears, but I knew enough to blow out my nose to equalize. After a few final panicked strokes, I reached the surface of the water at the bottom of the pool and burst through. There was no neon green light on the other side. No sounds of my friends, nothing but pitch-black darkness and echoing drips as my breath returned. Gasping and sputtering, I appeared to be in a cramped concrete tunnel of some kind. The walls were rough and met in an arch just a few inches over my head. "Hello?" I called out again. My voice shot down the tunnel in either direction, bouncing off the raw concrete as it traveled out into the distance. After a moment of terrified thought, I picked one direction as forward and started swimming, all too aware of my rapidly decreasing energy. I did my best to move straight, but in the pitch blackness, I still found myself bumping my head into the concrete arch when I drifted off course. I was bringing my foot forward to pull another stroke when my hand suddenly hit the tendrils of something organic and sticky. I jerked away in a panic, bumping my head hard against the concrete ceiling. My left hand swung towards the other wall of the tunnel, where yet more organic tendrils awaited me. They reminded me how the octopus tentacles at our local aquarium felt wrapped around my hand when I visited back in elementary school. I paddled water for a moment, slowly reaching out. The entire surface of the concrete walls below the water was covered in organic tentacles. Then the worst of it, off in the distance ahead of me, a distant metallic clinking sound grew steadily louder, like iron chains scraping against concrete. The tendrils on the walls responded to the sound, reaching out for me. The tunnel was still dark, pitch black, but I couldn't help but imagine some horrific creature making its way down the darkness of the tunnel towards me. Those horrible scraping chains were rapidly getting louder, but the echoing made it almost impossible to tell exactly how far. I dove down in the water, searching desperately for any light. There, some distance below me, I found yet another shimmering spot. I came up for a quick breath of air, the metal on concrete coming from close enough that I feared I'd touch it if I reached out a hand. With a terrified moan, I dove down once more, fighting off the organic stickiness that attempted to wrap around my arm. I burst through this new surface and was immediately grateful that there seemed to be at least some light in this new location, even if it wasn't the green neon lights that I had been praying for. I spun around, taking in my new surroundings. Judging by the sudden lack of echoes, I was outside in a large open body of water. It was still nighttime, just like it was back in Maine, but I appeared to be inside a fog bank that limited my visibility to just a few feet in every direction. A single hazy point of light. The moon, I assumed, shone through the fog in the distance. My arms, legs, and lungs burned in protest as I slowly treaded water. I paused for a moment, allowing the water to slip over my head, then fought back to the surface. I'd been trotting water for at least 15 minutes without rest. If I didn't find a place to rest, I'd soon drown. The thought surged a shot of adrenaline through me. "Help!" I shouted. "Is anyone there?" The words had barely escaped me when the fog bank rolled past, giving me a clear view of my surroundings. I was treading water on the calm surface of a lake. All around me, fog banks were moving across the surface of the water like implacable glaciers slowly sliding down a mountainslide. And off in the distance, I caught sight of a large metal truss bridge hanging perhaps 20 feet over the surface of the water between the fog banks. I immediately swam towards it, hope rising in my chest. When I thought I would be in earshot, I began shouting again, calling for help. I looked closer as I came to a stop underneath the bridge, staring up at its rusted underside. There were shapes hanging under it, shapes that... My blood ran cold. The shapes were bodies. At least a dozen bodies were chained, hanging upside down under the bridge, swaying in the chill fall breeze. Most were decayed, but several still had skin. One of the newer bodies was a young girl no older than 11. I stopped swimming, staring up in horror. The pause caused me to sink, almost dipping below the water. The scraping metal sound, the same sound that I'd heard in the dark tunnel. It was coming from above the bridge. I felt my entire body tense up. Then I dove down with only half a lungful of air, half choking on lake water. I didn't know what was making that sound, but I knew if I stayed under the bridge, I'd end up just like those poor people. I pulled at the water furiously, diving down towards what I prayed would be my friends. The lake water soon smothered any visibility from the moonlight, leaving me in pitch blackness. I continued to swim, to scan ahead of me for any shimmering water. My body rebelled, forcing me to take in a mouthful of water. I gagged, then turned back for the surface. For 3 strokes, I feared that I'd gotten turned around, that I was moving down, or worse, sideways. But no, on the next stroke, I saw a faint flash of moonlight. I swam like mad and burst through the surface, coughing and sputtering. I threw up into the lake, most of it water. I spun, trying to get my bearings. He was staring at me from where he hung between the bodies under the bridge. I say he because he was wearing a man's suit coat and slacks as if it were from the 1800s. But I don't think he was human. Humans have eyes, not pits. Humans have fingers attached to their hands instead of chains. Humans can't smile the way he was smiling. He was hanging from his right hand, chains wrapped around a truss. The chains of his other hand reached out and pushed around a few of the bodies, like a child swatting a wind chime. Then he reached for me. The chains holding him to the bridge slowly uncoiled, lowering him towards the surface of the water. The chains on his other hand spread out, snaking towards me with a supernatural speed. I didn't have a master plan. All I knew was that I would do anything rather than be caught, including drown. I took a single sharp gulp of air, then dove down just before the chains reached me. I swam, faster and deeper than before, the adrenaline coursing through my veins like fire. 7 strokes, 8, 11, 15, 23. He still hadn't caught me. He was probably waiting for me to reemerge. I wasn't going to. I continued to pull, my lungs burning, my already tired arms begging me to stop. My lungs gave an involuntary gulp again, but this time I was ready and locked my jaw and lips. 38 strokes. 45. I was starting to lose consciousness, but I was fairly certain I was still swimming straight down at least. At last, I saw light, shimmering neon green light. Darkness crowded at the edge of my vision, but I blew what little air remained in my lungs out in a cacophony of bubbles. And the next thing I knew, I was sputtering water and coughing on a cold concrete floor. I spun around and saw Travis along with my friends, each watching me with a concerned expression. "Dude," Travis said, "where have you been?" "Don't dive into the water," I said between retching coughs. "Don't go into the water." I'm sure that a good majority of you have seen them. I mean, even if you wouldn't care to admit it, those ads. You know, the hot singles in your area, hot, lonely girls waiting for you. You know, that kind of shit. Usually I don't think about them for more than a few seconds, but every once in a while we get curious. And the whole thing raises a few questions like, who are they? And who's falling for them? I mean, it's such a strange thing. You know, you'd think anybody with half a brain cell wouldn't bother with it. So why do they exist? I decided to try to find out. Using one of my old laptops, one that's already rife with viruses and hardly ever used. I went on one of those sites that you only go on to late at night, and I found one of those ads, and I clicked on it. Seemed pretty standard, you know. A small, horizontal banner colored a harsh yellow, bold, big bold letters next to some woman with breasts so large they were sort of hard to look at. The page it redirected me to was decorated with pictures of nude women, gazing longingly into the camera, beckoning for you to, of course, enter in your credit card information. It was about what I expected, and before exiting out of there, I took one last scan around the page, and I felt myself shiver, as if some part of my brain really didn't like what it was seeing. You know, at first I couldn't make sense of it. What the source of this sudden and inexplicable dread could have been. And then I looked closer at the girls. I mean, like, really close. Most of them looked normal. But there was this one. She was placed down in one of the corners, and she didn't look right. I'm almost tempted to draw it down to a case of Uncanny Valley, but in truth it was worse than that. Not only did I not feel like I was looking at a person, but also that this entity, whatever it was actually staring back at me, that it hated me. The strangest thing was, I couldn't put a finger on the problem. It would have been easy if her eyes or nose or some specific facial feature was off, distorted in some way, but no. It was more so that everything about her was off. And when I finally peeled my eyes away from the screen, it was dark outside. I mean, I could have sworn it had only been around 4 p.m. when I started. I yawned, I exited out of the page, and I slapped the laptop shut and stashed it back in my closet. Still feeling some vague sense of panic, I took some melatonin, smoked half a joint, and went to sleep. That night I dreamed about something horrible. I was sitting in the lobby of what I guessed was some cheap motel, and there were a lot of people sitting around me. Except they weren't people. Somehow I knew this. Upon waking, I felt uneasy. Decided to go for a run. I mean, it helped a bit. After showering, I made myself a large coffee. I sat down at my desk, intending to get some work done. 4 hours later, I was watching a pirated version of some Marvel show. Clicked on the screen to pause it so that I could go to the bathroom, and as I did so, it triggered a pop-up page. Not a big deal. When that happens, you just click off quickly, and that's the end of it. But I couldn't. Not this time. Out of the corner of my eye lingered that familiar yellow. I shook my head, avoiding looking directly at the screen, and thought, no, there was no possible way. And then I looked at the screen, and my heart drove itself down in my stomach. It was that same page. For a while, I tried not looking down in the bottom corner, even though I could already kind of see it when I looked. I finally gathered my senses. This time it was 2 a.m. and the collar of my shirt was soaked in cold sweat. I grabbed the mouse, I clicked off the page, and then I cleared my history and I turned the computer off. Sitting in the darkness, I listened to my sporadic breaths. This went on for a long time. I didn't go to sleep that night, and when morning came, it was time to go to work. Made myself a coffee, drained it, then made myself another one. Walking out of my apartment and onto the streets, I became paranoid that somebody was following me, but if anybody was, nothing came of it. Arriving in the office, I greeted my boss quickly. He stared at me while I walked past him, going to the washroom to splash water on my face. When I realized I looked like hell, kind of pissed me off. I was so strung out, but nothing had really happened. If something had happened, then I didn't understand what it was. And that fact just made me angrier. Drank another coffee, got to work. Sometime around noon, I think I dozed off. I don't remember what I was doing or how it happened, but at some point I opened my eyes, half groggy, half crazed. I stared at my computer screen. And you can guess what I saw. I nearly threw up. A few minutes later, somebody knocked on my door, putting me out of my daze. It's Eric, my coworker. "Are you okay, man?" he asked. Without looking at my screen, I turned my monitor off. "Yeah," he said. Eric squinted one eye at me. "I don't know how to tell you this, but every time I've walked by your office, you've been staring at your screen. I don't think I've seen you move an inch for like several hours." I just stared at him. "You sure you're okay?" I nodded yes, turned off the computer, and I left the office. On the walk home, once again, I felt like I was being followed, but this time I also felt an urgency, something telling me that I could not let them catch up. I started walking faster. I took a turn at the intersection. I ducked into the first door available. Some bar, relatively empty, a few college kids playing pool, some other Gentleman sitting in the back in the dark, smoking, drinking. I took a seat at the bar, ordered a shot of tequila, and then 2 more. The entire time I was hoping and praying that nobody else would come in, but around 5 minutes later, somebody did. They took the seat next to me, smelling heavy of cigarette smoke, while I stared ahead at the TV, even without looking at them. I could tell they were large. They had lots of tattoos. After a while, they spoke. "You want my help or not?" I sucked my teeth. Help with what? The man turned to me and stared, but nothing. It went on for a while before I became too uncomfortable not to address it. I looked at him. He appeared to be in his late 40s, though his real age was likely less than that. He had on sunglasses, and there was a small scar under the bottom of his left eye. "You want to know what this is?" he said. Not a question. I looked forward, feeling nervous, then squeezed my eyes shut. "What is it?" The man took a swig from his beer. "It's a virus." "A computer virus?" He nodded. "Yeah. This one's special." "Special how?" "Wasn't man-made." I shook my head. "So what, it's an AI robot fucking with me?" The man smiled, showing lightly stained but straight teeth. "No." Then he looked at me. "It's a strange kind of virus. Something that propagates itself through machines, and then into other things." "Other things," I repeated. "Just trying to ease you into it. You understand what I'm trying to say?" "How did you know that I saw it?" The man breathed deeply. "'Cause I can see her. She follows you around. Follows a lot of people around." "Who?" "Come on," the man said. "You know." "Okay," I said. "Then where is she now?" I looked at the man and he just stared back at me. Slowly, his eyes drifted over my shoulder, and for a short while, he stared at something else, something in one of the bar's dark corners. He shook his head. "I'll show you how to get rid of her," he said. "But not here." I shook my head. "It's not possible," I said. "How could she be here?" The man stared at me. "You don't believe me? Look over your shoulder." I stared back at him. And after a while, I realized I didn't want to do that. Or I was unable to. To be honest, I'm not sure which one it was. Then I told him yes. I'd like to know how to get rid of her. He told me that we should go somewhere private. Either my place or his. I told him we'd go to mine. On the walk there, he asked me how many times I'd seen her. I told him 2, maybe 3. He asked me if it was really 2 or 3. I thought about it, and I settled on 3. Then I looked down at the ground without saying anything. He walked into my place, and I sat on the couch while he stood by the doorway. I offered him a beer or a coffee, and he declined. "Well," I said, my exhaustion closing in on being unbearable, made worse by the alcohol. What do I have to do?" He stood silent for a while before speaking. "What you need to understand is that you can't let her reach you. You don't want to see her. Which is why I'm asking you how to get rid of her." "It's not easy." What do I have to do?" He walked toward me, sat down on the couch across, lifted his hand, pulled down his sunglasses. Behind them sat empty sockets and scarred flesh. My chest tightened. "You don't want to see her," he responded, putting them back on. "But I already have." He shook his head. No, you haven't. Not until the virus is in you." "If it's not in me yet, then what's the problem?" The man breathed through his nose. Let me rephrase that. "It's already in you. It's not strong enough. hasn't been activated. I stared at him. For most people, it happens after the third time. Nobody's ever made it to 5. I said, I won't look at it again. You know, that's not possible. I stared at him. You're marked. It's in you. It's going to find its way onto any screen you look at. Well, then I won't look at any screens. Better than cutting my fucking eyes out. The man laughed. You don't understand. It'll find a way. It doesn't matter what you do. Fuck you, I said. Get the fuck out of here. I'm not just trying to help you, he said. I'm trying to save you. Well, I don't need to be saved. You don't understand. You can't let it catch you. You can't see it. Have you seen it? I asked. The man looked around, and then down at the floor, and then back at me. I still can't. For a while, we sat silent. Tense, I watched as he slowly lowered his hand, reaching for something in his back pocket. Don't, I said. I'm trying to save you. I began backing away. It's not just you, he continued. We can't let this thing spread. We can't. The man lunged forward, cutting me across the forearm. I grabbed my lamp and broke the bulb across his head. He lunged again, weaker this time. I kicked him in the neck. He went down. I stepped over him and pushed the knife away with my foot. The man heaved a breath, and then he laughed. Just kill me, he said. You don't, then I'll just keep trying to save you, to stop this. I stood over him, breathing heavy, still unsure. I don't want to see her anymore, he continued. She's outside your window, you know. I closed my eyes. And I strangled him. When I finished, there was a smile on his face. I took a bat. I smashed my monitor. Waited until night came, dragged his body to my car, stuffed him in the trunk. I began to drive. Where I was going, I wasn't sure. At some point, I stopped at a diner to get some coffee, but now I hadn't slept for 35, maybe 40 hours. Sitting at my table, my eyes drifted lazily to the television. Hockey game was on. I stared at the screen, not really interested, but for some reason I couldn't look away. Sometime later, a waitress was shaking my shoulder, telling me that I had to leave. I looked away from the television and down at the table and realized what had just happened. I began to cry. The waitress watched me for a while before backing off. Once she did, I grabbed my cup, I stood up, I flung it hard into the television. Through the cracked screen, I could still see her face. Lingering, distorted. Horrible. Then it went black, and I stumbled out to my car. It was bright outside now. I sat there, gripping the wheel tight. I looked at the rear view, and I saw something in the distance, something moving strangely, almost gliding on the road towards my car. It wasn't another car. It's too small for that. I opened the glove compartment, seeing the knife the man had tried to blind me with. The one I had taken before leaving. I grabbed it. I sat down into the passenger seat. And I stared at it. She's getting closer. I'm thinking maybe I should. But maybe it's already too late for that. Great party. I was standing next to the fireplace, drinking a glass of champagne, asking myself why had I even come in the first place. Melody Winters, accounting team leader, was trying her best to flirt with me as I gazed out at the crowd. Maybe a couple dozen people had shown up. None of them were familiar. It's amazing how you can work at a place for nearly 6 years and not recognize a single face. The only reason I even knew Melody was because of the name badge the host had insisted we all wear. "Don't thank me, this is all Lucas," I told her, pointing towards the marketing manager. He was clicking his fork against his glass to get everyone's attention, just as I had mentioned him. "Hey everyone, thanks again for coming here. This year has definitely been rougher. Harder than most, if I'm being honest. And it just means a lot to be able to spend time with all of you," he commented. A few coworkers raised their glasses as he asked for everyone to take a toast, but most of us weren't really paying attention to the rest of his speech. Instead, we were focused on the smorgasbord of food that was now on display as the caterers arrived. I can't even properly describe the aroma. It was heavenly. There were mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, sliced ham, cranberry-sauced hot wings, even a fully roasted turkey. It was like taking a trip back in time to our childhood. Seeing all of it made my mouth literally start watering. I was eager for Lucas to finish his boring speech so we could dig in, and by the looks of everyone else in attendance, we were all thinking the same thing. Most of us planned to stuff our faces full, get drunk, and then maybe get lucky with a coworker if the night got really interesting. But it was already apparent from just the small talk in the room, no one had much intention of staying longer than they had to. "Now does anyone have a few words before we bless the food?" Lucas asked. For an awkward moment, no one dared to raise their hand. Then a finger shot up near the bathroom, and I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Who in the fuck was holding up their meal just to blab for a few seconds? The stranger pushed her way towards the front, smiling toward all of us as she reached for one of the wine bottles. "It's so lovely to gather together like this with folks like yourselves. It makes everything so much more enjoyable," she cooed, as she uncorked it and took a glass to pour. "I want to propose a toast," she said as she let the beverage slip out into the clean cup. Not sure why, but as it fell into the glass, I thought it got cloudy and dark, as if there was something swirling about in the drink. She passed the drink to Lucas and then poured one for everyone else in the room. Surprisingly, the drink didn't run out, even though she made sure each of us had a full cup. Then she raised it to the heavens. We all downed it as she proclaimed, "To gluttony." As I swallowed the drink, I felt this strange tingling sensation in the back of my throat. The kind you get when you swallow a bitter pill, except about 10 times worse. I saw the others were also reacting a bit adversely to the wine, and panic set in. Had she just poisoned us? Who was this crazy woman? Why had she just made such a bizarre toast? Right now, you're probably thinking I must be crazy. But I'm also honest. All of you came here for one reason, and it wasn't for companionship or camaraderie. It was to gorge yourself on this fine food in front of us tonight. We don't even know each other's names, let alone care about who we are or why we're here. In fact, I wager that once this night ended, this whole thing would just be a blurry memory best forgotten. But I plan to change all of that. I came here to make sure that this was one memory you never could get rid of, no matter how hard you try. So eat, drink, be merry. The food here will certainly be plentiful, and as you will soon discover, the flavors and dishes prepared are like nothing you've ever experienced before. You'll wish that you had the decency to have shirked the invitation. You'll dream of being hungry, and most importantly, you'll stone for your sinful and lavish lifestyles. Stuffing your faces while children starve to death. There's nothing but shame that can be given to you, and what I offer tonight is just a small taste of what will befall you for the rest of your miserable, pathetic existence. Bon appetit. As she finished the speech, she reached towards the silver cover that hid one of the dishes and revealed to all of us the most disgusting entree I'd ever laid eyes on. It reminded me of a cockroach lying on its back, the thorax and abdomen exposed, with 6 long legs sticking out and dripping yellow pus from them. It was as black as tar and completely glazed with what seemed like old glue and melted rotten cheese. And if I'm not mistaken, it appeared that the giant insect was twitching, as though still alive. Immediately, all of us took a step back in revulsion, and I looked to Lucas for an explanation. But instead of showing me a look of concern, his eyes went hazy and hypnotic, as though he was lost in the desert and desperate for a drink. He stood over the bug, cutting into it with his carving knife, the way that you would a turkey. The raunch odor that came out as its belly spilled towards the rest of the food immediately made a few guests close to Lucas vomit. Even some of their disgusting throw-up got onto his clothing, but he didn't even flinch. Instead, to my utter shock, he leaned down toward the goopy mess that was sliding out of the insect and began to gnaw on it like a wild animal. Then he pushed his entire face into the slop, slurping on it greedily as the stench grew stronger. Others in the party started to join in, slowly making their way to the table and choosing a dish. At first I thought they were acting possessed, but instead I could tell by the look of fear on their faces that they were being forced against their will to eat. A man wearing a blue polo jacket chose the potatoes, picking one up and tenderly peeling it. Inside the skin of the vegetable, I could see what looked to be tiny, prickly quills that reminded me of a porcupine. I tried to shout for him to stop. Instead, he bit down on it hard, even though the needles were beginning to shoot out into the roof of his mouth. As he crunched on the potato, I saw the long needles piercing his tongue and the inner cheek of his mouth, making his entire face swell from their poisons. His eyes sealed shut, his face became a bulbous mass of pain as he continually ate on the dangerous food, blood pooling out and into his plate. Another woman pushed past me to lick the blood, lapping it up the way a dog would, and then spreading it across one of the other dishes as though it were a salad dressing. Some of them began to choke on their food, being unable to put it down their throats, and yet still trying to force down more. One woman in particular, I could see her throat bulging, and it looked like her skin might burst. A second later, it did. Broken pieces of bone sticking out of her neck as the toxic food she ate ripped her esophagus apart. At the same time, I saw a long trickle of spiders emerge from the bone, crawling off of her body and into the turkey that had yet to be touched. I found myself wandering towards it, unable to control the urge to cut it apart. It was filled with spiders and with maggots, thousands of them writhing as I finished carving and dipping my fingers into the disgusting dish. The sludge that was forming on my fingers did not look even remotely edible. It reminded me of a dirty diaper, the crusted remains of week-old feces getting stuck under my nails as I licked my thumb. A gagging sensation overwhelmed me as I vomited the food right back up and onto the turkey, feeling myself dry heave and fall to the floor, hitting a puddle of what felt like wet, clumped hair as I did. Melody stepped over me, herself overwhelmed by the same psychedelic urge to devour this pallet of putrefying delicacies and slurping the maggots up on the way that you would a noodle. Lucas came up to her, clearly enamored with her more than the food, and with the ooze of the insects still dripping from his lips, he proceeded to kiss her. Melody responded with eager lust, pushing him back onto the table and ripping his clothes off, but this wasn't carnal passion. I saw her reach for her utensils and knew immediately what dark desire she planned. She cut into his stomach with surgical precision. A nauseating aroma of overcooked fat and dead fish filled the air. Then she reached into his exposed belly with her bare hands, dragging out his intestines and biting into them like a crazed zombie. She ripped it apart and tossed it to the other coworkers, all of whom were beginning to turn on one another. They were gnawing at each other's faces, tearing off their skin and chewing on it like it was jerky. I could see someone ripping an eye out of its socket. One woman had gone so far as to completely take off her husband's nose. She was now fingering the empty hole in his face to eat more of his innards. Above it all, I saw the mysterious woman standing there, gleefully smiling as she whispered something to herself. I crawled away from the madness to confront her. "What is this? What are you?" I asked, barely able to make a whisper. I could feel sores forming in my mouth, my skin being eaten away by the filth I had just devoured, and I knew she was at the center of all of it. Even if I was about to die, I needed an answer. "Consider me a warning of what's to come for all who tend to cater to their vices," she said, as she bit down on the glass cup she was sipping. Shard pieces of glass piercing her tongue and lips without even much of a flinch of pain. "And me? Why am I getting to live?" I asked her. I could tell whatever spell she had worked on me and the others was waning off, yet still they continued to stuff their bellies with more guck, their stomachs literally ready to burst at a moment's notice. "Luck of the draw," the woman said, as she stepped over the heaving body of Melody, her face a contortion of disgust and shock as she couldn't stop nibbling on her own fingers down to the bone. I don't know what happened after I left. I went home to shower, just desperate to wash away the muck and the grossness of the event, wishing it was all a dream. Then I saw Lucas at work, and I thought to myself, maybe it really had been a nightmare. A horror fever dream made by my strange, twisted recesses of my mind. We're having a luncheon today, the leftovers. You should come by and have a bite, he said. I peered towards the break room and saw Melody standing there. Her belly looked so full, swollen, and pregnant. Her eyes were filled with pain and with hunger as she gently rubbed her stomach. I saw something kick. What's on the menu? I asked as I felt my throat go dry. He smiled and showed me green, plaque-covered teeth with bits of skin still stuck in them. Gonna be fresh, he said, slapping my back heartily. I took a swallow of tap water and gave him a strange smile. I think I'll pass. I'm not hungry. Truth be told, though, as I left work that day, I was hungrier than I'd ever been. If I'm being honest, even the most vile things were appealing to me as I passed by a vat of gelatinous grease on the way to the dump. One more bite, I thought to myself. I looked down at my stained, dirty, disgusting clothes and realized I knew who the stranger was last night. A name formed on my crusted, thirsty lips. Personification of gluttony. Adiphagia. A goddess that opened my eyes to the world. Damn me to this hell I must now suffer through. And that glow in her eyes told me she intended to have more worship at her altar soon. What a feast we've made for ourselves. What a feast we've made.
Times have been tough for me, so I haven't quite updated everything as I would have liked in the past couple of months. I'm finally getting back to the swing of things as my life continues to normalize. So I appreciate you guys sticking with me, and honestly, I see all of your comments and your support as I've been talking about what's been happening with me, and I want to tell you all thank you so much for that, because it's been rough, and seeing your support has been life-saving. So thank you all so much for it. And as always, I want to give a big thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. That includes everybody who's been waiting for me to update my Patreon, and I thank you all so much for being so patient with me. But especially, I want to give a thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Jacob Fenske, Stephanie Butler, Bobby Karman, Chance Burnett, Kraus, Tristain Pelton, AcidSystem, Adam Gerecke, Aeryn Stormcrow, Aika Limchoc, Amber Clark, Angelus, Atomaurus, Bastion Beefcake, Blue the Enigma, Brayden Morris, Broken Beast 320, Captain Scurvy, Caspian, Shelly J, Corey Kenshin, Cronut 509, Crusader Chocobo, Cryptic Nightmares, Curse Pox Primarch, Dakota Lane Whetstone, Daniel Paulson, Darth Miver, Deleted Account, Dirt Diver 030, M, Esteban, Fester's Lambshade, Freddy Krueger, Gorag Trimagasi, Grand Moth the Milky, Hades Nephew, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Harley, Himbo Jerry, Horseman Sect Time, Insanity Gamer X, Jay Cairns, Jesus Corneo, Jordan Humble, Justin LaFontaine, Kaylee Ambrose, Kiwi the Sloth, Crazy Kid, Cryolinian, Lambda M98, Lisa Cottrell, Little Crow, Lord Life's Best, Lupita Galvin, Love You Eminem, Matt Bach, Melted Lake, Michael Allen Jr. Brashears, Mike, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Nate Cull, Nico Kaio, Psychomel, Red Shadow Cat, Rob Like Sharp Things, Samahai, Sashi Suzaku, Seclude, Stricken, Tali Sue, Tater Chip, That Creepy Chick, The Ginger Bros, Turtle Man, Voice of Sand, William King, Xavier and Cheyenne, Yargul, and Zachary Graphius. If you would like to join this list of names that I horribly mispronounce, then please head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta, or you can always check out the names in the description down below, and I appreciate it infinitely. So thank you all on Patreon, thank you all so much, and to everyone, sweet dreams.